Every game developer at one point has had the dream of being a solo dev or even part of a small indie team that builds the next big game. It is simply a life ambition. But what happens when you actually achieve that dream and it turns out to be nothing like you expected? This is the story of the cultural phenomenon Flappy Bird and how the game developer dream became a nightmare for its creator. This is Dong Nguyen, a Vietnam-based developer and programmer. In 2005, Dong founded his very own video game company called Dot Gears and got to work making his very own games. All the games that he developed were relatively simple to today's standards. They were 2D, side-scrollers, or even single inputs. He believed that most games were overcomplicated and busy. So with the games that he would create, they would be much simpler. This would also fit perfectly because he also believed that mobile was the future for gaming. It was a complete new era, but it was still at the very beginning. Smartphones themselves, even being great technology to utilize, they still had their limitations. But it was still way more than enough for what Dong Nguyen wanted to do. His first game was called Shuriken Block, and it fit perfectly with what Dong Nguyen wanted to create. It was a single input game. Characters would be lined up at the bottom, and shurikens would fall from the sky. It became a twitch mechanic as players would have to tap the screen in order to stop these shurikens from actually hitting the characters. If it hit the characters too many times, that would be it. Game over. But even though this in itself is fairly plain and simple, Dong Nguyen wanted to go even simpler. This is where we welcome Flappy Birds. In total, it took Dong Nguyen only 3 days to create Flappy Bird, and was assisted because he did have some assets left over from a game that he was creating before. This includes the bird, who is called Fabi. Just like Shuriken Block, this was a single input game. You simply tap anywhere on the screen to boost altitude. By doing nothing, the bird will descend back down. And the goal is to avoid as many obstacles as possible, being the big green pipes. It was perfect. It was easy for anyone to pick up and play, but very difficult to master. The design had this bootstrap feel to it, as a lot of it made you feel familiar with the likes of Mario. The green pipes as well as the overall color palette, especially when you compare it to the grasslands levels. And as far as those who played it during the time back in 2014, they believed it was an instant success. Except it wasn't. No one even knew it existed. Flappy Bird was released in May of 2013. Dong Nguyen didn't even promote it, so it didn't get its first players until December of 2013 later that year. And this is when everything changed. Suddenly Flappy Bird became a viral sensation. Downloads skyrocketed and it showed no signs of slowing down. Starting out with just a couple downloads per day, couple hundred, couple thousand, tens of thousands, and then millions. By the end of December, it was in the top 100 on Apple's App Store, and at the end of January, it was number 1. It wasn't long until everyone was playing it. Notable YouTubers such as PewDiePie would jump onto the trend and record themselves trying to get the highest possible score. This pushed Flappy Bird forward to 50 million downloads. Many believed it would be just as successful as Angry Birds or even Temple Run. Everyone was talking about the success. But this was also when cracks started to show, and in reality, it was a nightmare for Dong Nguyen. With the meteoric success, reports started to come out that Dong Nguyen was making around $50,000 every single day, just through in-game mobile ads alone. Flappy Bird did not have microtransactions. It was entirely free to play, but there would be an ad playing on your screen. That was the only way he was making money. And even though, on the surface, each play of an ad would give 0.0001, because so many people were playing it, it led to a substantial amount of money. There were loads of people which were happy for him, but others not so much. They became spiteful. Before the release of Flappy Bird, Dong Nguyen lived a very humble life. When he started to make this money, he stayed within his means. He didn't even tell his parents about the game despite still living with them at the time. It wasn't until later when the local news started to report on the game that his parents found out. the second that he started to make this money, he did two things. The first thing was buy himself a new Mac so that he can continue to develop games just on a better system. The second thing was take his friends out for dinner. You could not have a more down-to-earth guy. But a headline of Flappy Bird making 50k a day created a monster within society. Suddenly, more reports would come out, throwing out allegations that Dong Nguyen actually faked downloads and engagement at the beginning to kickstart the climb to the top. There was emphasis on addiction within every article that was published. Flappy Bird was portrayed as being so addictive that if you just picked it up, your life would fall apart. There was even a viral story at the time of a teenager arrested for killing his own brother after his brother achieved a higher score on Flappy Birds. This story became more viral than the game itself, despite being completely fake. Many people read the headline, read the story, and instantly believed it because it does sound like something that would be true. For those that were taking the situation more serious, such as gaming journalists, they would still tear the game apart. They resented the idea that other developers within the industry were putting in weeks, months, years, putting blood, sweat, and tears into their games, making sure it was perfect for release. But Flappy Birds, developed in just 3 days, using assets from other popular games, managed to get to #1. Journalists would highlight the lazy design whilst pushing the ripped art assets as a dig to Dong Nguyen as being a terrible developer. But with all of this, it was nothing compared to the constant abuse on social media. Constant tweets were flooding through of people getting frustrated with the game, hating the game. Parents and teachers would reach out, sending him direct messages telling him that his game was dangerous. And even when Dong Nguyen ignored all of these online posts, he still couldn't escape. His face was plastered everywhere. His local news reported on the story, and soon after, he was included in all major Vietnamese newspapers. Everyone knew who he was. Reporters and paparazzi would sit outside of his house constantly and would never leave, despite being asked multiple times. And that's when Dong Nguyen made the hard decision. On the 8th February 2014, he posted this on Twitter. "I can call Flappy Bird is a success of mine, but it also ruins my simple life. So now I hate it. I'm sorry, Flappy Bird users. 22 hours from now, I will take Flappy Bird down. I cannot take this anymore. It is not anything related to legal issues. I just cannot keep it anymore." Despite this being the end of Flappy Bird, it would get an additional 10 million downloads within those final 22 hours, taking it to 90 million downloads in total. But it's also brought on a new wave of hate. Those which were massive fans of the game also now hated Dong Nguyen for removing the game. After the takedown, Dong Nguyen went silent, which opened a door for even more speculation and rumors. A rumor started to spread that Dong Nguyen didn't take down the game because of negative attention, but in fact because he's now being sued by Nintendo. This rumor spread so quickly and so vast that Nintendo themselves had to put out a statement saying that this was not true. Another rumor followed this saying Dong Nguyen killed himself because he couldn't handle the hate. Also, another rumor which was not true. This was also the time in which even more wild stories would come out, because even though Dong Nguyen took Flappy Bird off the app stores, there were still a lot of devices which managed to download it before it was completely taken away, so that they still have Flappy Bird on their device. And those devices were selling for thousands. And of course, Dong Nguyen got blamed for this as well, highlighting how addictive his game was. After the dust settled, Dong Nguyen did an interview with Forbes where he would explain his motive to remove the game from the App Store. He stated that it was designed to play in a few minutes when you are relaxed, but it happened to become an addictive product. I think it has become a problem. To solve that problem, it's best to take down Flappy Bird. It's gone forever. But in a following Rolling Stones interview, he highlighted that a big part of why he took the game down was because of all the negative attention, all the different articles, all the different social media posts, all of it was aimed at him. Whatever the reason, Dong Nguyen saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and he felt that he made the right decision. Despite this, as soon as Flappy Bird was taken down, imitations started to follow. It was reported that a new Flappy Bird clone was developed every 24 minutes on the Apple App Store. People saw that Don was making $50,000 a day, and the dollar signs just lit up their eyes. Everyone wanted a piece of that money now that Flappy Bird was no longer available. Games such as Fly Birdie, Happy Bee, Fluffy Birds, Flappy Plane, hundreds of different variations. 10 of the top 100 games at the time were Flappy Bird clones. It got so bad that Google and Apple both had to reject a lot of the new clones that were coming in. There was just way too many. But in a weird twist of fate, Dong Nguyen in March 2014 would announce that Flappy Bird would return but will be less addictive. Now to this day, there are still rumors that Dong is working on this game, but that's also not true. The game did release, just not to mobile. The Flappy Bird's family was released for Amazon Fire TV on August 1st, 2014. This would be the exact same game with a few slight improvements, which includes multiplayer, egg pickups, and ghost enemies. After the success of Flappy Birds, Dong Nguyen quit his job, hired new employees for his game company, and started to work on new projects such as Swingcopters, Swingcopters 2, and Ninja Spinky Challenges. Dong himself has somewhat disappeared. We know that he has been using his millions to fund university game projects and is reportedly making more games behind the scenes, but with those, nothing really has happened. The games in which he has published haven't received any updates, and on the website it does say that a game called Bloop is in development, but it was announced January 1st, 2022, and nothing has been heard ever since. But that's how Dong Nguyen wanted to live his life. He didn't want to have his face plastered everywhere. He didn't want all the attention. He just wanted to make the games that he wanted to make and keep a low profile. And if he's able to do that now after 10 years since the Flappy Bird release, then I'm happy for him.